Confidence is one of the most misunderstood traits in human behavior. The loudest person in the room is often assumed to be the most secure. The one who speaks boldly, dominates conversations, and appears completely certain of themselves is usually perceived as someone who possesses unshakable confidence. Yet psychology reveals a very different reality. Some of the behaviors that look like confidence on the surface are actually powerful masks designed to hide deep internal insecurity. Insecurity rarely presents itself openly. It does not always appear as nervousness, silence, or visible self-doubt. Instead, it often hides behind arrogance, constant criticism, attention-seeking, or the relentless need to prove something to the world. Many people spend years perfecting this disguise, carefully building a personality that protects them from the painful fear of not feeling good enough. Human beings are naturally wired to protect their self-worth. When that sense of worth becomes fragile, the mind begins to develop defense mechanisms. These defenses are not always conscious. A person might not even realize that their behaviors, boasting about success, criticizing others, competing with everyone around them, are all strategies designed to shield a wounded sense of identity. Psychologists often describe insecurity as the silent fear of inadequacy. It is the internal voice that whispers that one is not smart enough, attractive enough, successful enough, or worthy enough. When this voice becomes too loud, people begin to compensate for it through their behavior. They build walls around their self-image, and sometimes those walls can look surprisingly impressive from the outside. This is why insecurity can be difficult to detect. The most insecure individual in a group may not appear timid at all. In fact, they might appear dominant, charming, or even intimidating. But beneath that surface often lies a fragile self-concept constantly seeking protection and validation. Understanding these behaviors is important, not to judge others, but to better understand human psychology. Many of these patterns appear in everyday interactions, in workplaces, friendships, relationships, and even online. Once you learn to recognize them, certain behaviors suddenly start to make much more sense. In this exploration of human behavior, we will uncover 7 psychological signs that someone may be secretly insecure, even if they appear confident on the outside. These signs are subtle, but once you recognize them, they reveal how insecurity often hides in plain sight. Insecurity is not simply a lack of confidence. At its core, it is a fragile relationship with one's own self-worth. Psychologists describe it as a persistent internal feeling of inadequacy or self-doubt that makes a person question their value, abilities, or identity. While everyone experiences moments of insecurity from time to time, for some individuals it becomes a quiet but powerful force shaping how they behave around others. The origins of insecurity often trace back to earlier life experiences. Childhood criticism, constant comparison, emotional neglect, rejection, or failure can slowly shape the way a person sees themselves. Over time, these experiences create an internal narrative that says, "You are not enough." Even when someone grows older and becomes successful or respected, that internal voice may still linger beneath the surface. To cope with these uncomfortable feelings, the human mind naturally develops defense mechanisms. These defenses act like psychological armor, protecting the individual from situations that might expose their self-doubt. Some people withdraw and become quiet, while others take the opposite approach, becoming overly dominant, competitive, or attention-seeking. Both responses serve the same purpose: protecting a fragile sense of identity. One of the most fascinating aspects of insecurity is how effectively it can disguise itself. Instead of appearing weak, it often appears strong. A person who constantly talks about their achievements may actually be trying to convince themselves of their worth. Someone who aggressively criticizes others may be trying to silence their own inner doubts. What looks like confidence can sometimes be a carefully constructed performance. Psychologists often refer to this phenomenon as compensation. When people feel a deficiency in one area of their self-image, they attempt to compensate for it through exaggerated behavior. A person who feels intellectually insecure may constantly try to prove they are the smartest in the room. Someone who feels socially inadequate may try to dominate conversations or control social situations. Recognizing hidden insecurity requires looking beyond surface behavior. It requires observing patterns, how people react to criticism, how they handle success or failure, and how they treat others when their own ego feels threatened. When these patterns appear repeatedly, they often reveal an underlying struggle with self-worth. With this foundation in mind, the next step is to examine the first behavioral sign. The first signal of hidden insecurity is subtle but extremely common, and it appears in everyday conversations, relationships, and even on social media. It is the constant search for validation. One of the clearest psychological signals of hidden insecurity is the constant need for validation. On the surface, this behavior can appear harmless, even normal. Everyone appreciates encouragement and recognition from time to time. But when a person repeatedly depends on external approval to feel confident or satisfied, it often reveals that their sense of self-worth is being built on unstable ground. People who secretly struggle with insecurity tend to measure their value through the reactions of others. Compliments become emotional fuel, and approval becomes a form of reassurance that they are doing well enough. Without this feedback, they may begin to question themselves, replaying their actions and wondering whether they were accepted or appreciated by those around them. This pattern can show up in many subtle ways. Some individuals frequently ask for reassurance after completing even simple tasks. Others constantly check whether their opinions are liked, whether their appearance is admired, or whether their achievements are being noticed. In social settings, they may look around for signs of approval, smiles, praise, or recognition that confirms their importance within the group. In the modern digital world, this behavior has become even more visible. Social media platforms often turn validation into a measurable number through likes, comments, and shares. For someone who feels internally insecure, these numbers can begin to feel like proof of their value. A post that receives attention can create temporary confidence, while a lack of engagement can quietly trigger self-doubt. The underlying psychological mechanism is simple but powerful. When a person's self-worth depends primarily on external validation, they begin to outsource their confidence to other people. Instead of feeling secure within themselves, they rely on the world around them to confirm that they matter. This creates a fragile emotional cycle where confidence rises and falls depending on how others respond. Truly secure individuals tend to operate differently. While they appreciate encouragement, they do not rely on it to define their worth. Their sense of value comes from internal beliefs about who they are rather than constant confirmation from others. As a result, they can function confidently even when praise or recognition is absent. For someone struggling with hidden insecurity, however, validation becomes more than encouragement. It becomes a necessity. And when approval becomes a necessity, the next behavioral pattern often follows naturally: the habit of constantly comparing themselves to others. Another powerful indicator of hidden insecurity is the constant habit of comparing oneself to other people. Comparison is a natural human tendency. It helps individuals evaluate their progress, learn from others, and understand their position within a social group. However, when comparison becomes excessive and emotionally charged, it often reveals a deeper struggle with self-worth. People who are secretly insecure tend to view life through the lens of competition. Instead of appreciating their own path, they frequently measure their achievements, appearance, intelligence, or success against those around them. Every promotion, compliment, or accomplishment that someone else receives may quietly trigger feelings of inadequacy. In their mind, another person's success begins to feel like evidence of their own shortcomings. This mindset can create a silent but exhausting internal battle. Rather than celebrating the achievements of others, the insecure mind interprets them as threats. A friend's new job, a colleague's recognition, or even someone else's confidence can activate a sense of discomfort. The comparison does not always happen consciously, but the emotional response often reveals what is happening beneath the surface. In many cases, this behavior leads to subtle attempts to minimize the accomplishments of others. A person might downplay someone's success by suggesting it was luck, timing, or unfair advantage. These comments may appear casual, but they often serve an important psychological function. By reducing the value of someone else's achievement, the insecure mind temporarily protects its own fragile self-image. Social environments can amplify this pattern dramatically. In workplaces, friendships, and online communities, people are constantly exposed to the achievements and lifestyles of others. For someone struggling with insecurity, this constant stream of comparison can intensify feelings of inadequacy, making it difficult for them to feel satisfied with their own progress. Psychologists often describe this behavior as social comparison theory in action. Humans naturally evaluate themselves by looking at others, but individuals with strong self-confidence tend to use comparison for inspiration rather than judgment. Insecure individuals, however, often interpret comparison as a ranking system where someone must be above and someone must be below. Over time, this mindset can shape how they interact with the people around them. When someone feels constantly threatened by comparison, they may begin to protect their ego in other ways. One of the most common methods is by shifting attention away from their own insecurities and placing it onto the flaws of others. This leads directly to the next psychological sign: excessive criticism. One of the most revealing signs of hidden insecurity is the habit of constantly criticizing other people. At first glance, criticism may appear to be confidence or strong judgment. Some individuals present themselves as brutally honest, sharp observers of flaws, or people who simply tell the truth. But when criticism becomes frequent, harsh, and directed at nearly everyone, psychology often sees something deeper beneath the surface. People who struggle with insecurity sometimes attempt to elevate themselves by lowering others. By pointing out the weaknesses, mistakes, or shortcomings of those around them, they temporarily create the illusion of superiority. In that moment, focusing on another person's flaws distracts them from confronting their own inner doubts. This behavior is closely related to a psychological defense mechanism known as projection. Projection occurs when individuals attribute feelings, fears, or insecurities they have about themselves to someone else. A person who secretly doubts their own intelligence might frequently mock others for being uninformed. Someone insecure about their appearance may become unusually critical of how other people look. Criticism can also become a subtle strategy for maintaining control in social environments. By constantly judging others, insecure individuals position themselves as the evaluator rather than the one being evaluated. This shift allows them to avoid situations where their own abilities, personality, or achievements might be questioned. It creates a protective barrier around their fragile sense of identity. Over time, this pattern can influence how they are perceived by those around them. While criticism may initially seem like confidence or assertiveness, repeated negativity often begins to reveal its true nature. People may start to notice that the critic rarely celebrates others' successes or acknowledges positive qualities. Instead, their attention gravitates toward imperfections. Interestingly, truly confident individuals rarely need to tear others down. Secure people tend to recognize that another person's strengths do not diminish their own. They are comfortable acknowledging talent, success, or intelligence in others because their self-worth does not depend on being superior. For someone who is secretly insecure, however, the idea of others excelling can feel threatening. As a result, criticism becomes a defensive habit, a way of protecting the ego from perceived comparison. But when this defensive shield is challenged, especially through feedback or correction, another revealing behavior often appears. That behavior is an extreme difficulty accepting criticism themselves. One of the most telling indicators of hidden insecurity appears when a person receives criticism. For individuals with a stable sense of self-worth, feedback is usually seen as information. It may not always feel pleasant, but it can still be processed calmly, evaluated logically, and sometimes even appreciated as an opportunity for improvement. However, for someone who is secretly insecure, criticism can feel like a direct attack on their identity. When the self-image is fragile, even small corrections can trigger a strong emotional response. Instead of hearing the feedback itself, the insecure mind interprets the situation as a threat to their value as a person. The comment is no longer just about a mistake, a decision, or a behavior. It suddenly feels like proof that they are not good enough. This is why the reaction can appear surprisingly intense. These reactions often take several recognizable forms. Some people immediately become defensive, arguing against the feedback before fully understanding it. Others shift blame onto external factors or other individuals in order to protect their ego. In certain cases, the response may be emotional withdrawal, where the person shuts down the conversation entirely rather than face the discomfort of being corrected. Another common response is rationalization. Instead of acknowledging the possibility that the criticism may be valid, the individual begins constructing explanations to justify their actions. The goal is not necessarily to understand the situation better, but to restore their damaged self-image as quickly as possible. By convincing themselves that the criticism is unfair or irrelevant, they avoid confronting the insecurity underneath. Psychologists explain this behavior through the concept of ego defense. When a person's identity feels threatened, the mind automatically activates protective strategies to preserve self-esteem. These strategies operate quickly and often unconsciously. The person may genuinely believe they are simply defending themselves when in reality they are protecting a deeper fear of inadequacy. Interestingly, people with genuine confidence tend to approach criticism very differently. Because their sense of worth is not built on perfection, they are more comfortable admitting mistakes or acknowledging areas where they can improve. Feedback becomes information rather than humiliation, and correction becomes part of growth rather than a threat to identity. For someone who is secretly insecure, however, the idea of imperfection can feel dangerous. Their identity depends heavily on appearing competent, capable, and respected. When that image is challenged, the instinct to defend it becomes powerful. This leads to another behavior that often appears alongside hidden insecurity: the persistent need to prove their value by impressing others. Another powerful sign of hidden insecurity appears in the constant effort to impress others. At first glance, ambition and the desire to present oneself well can seem completely normal. Many people enjoy sharing their achievements or celebrating their progress. But when someone feels the need to repeatedly prove their worth, display their success, or highlight their status in nearly every interaction, Psychology often sees a deeper motivation beneath the surface. Individuals who secretly struggle with insecurity may believe that their value depends on how others perceive them. Because of this belief, they work hard to project an image of success, intelligence, influence, or superiority. They may frequently talk about their accomplishments, emphasize their connections, or subtly highlight possessions and achievements that signal status. This behavior can take many forms. Some people constantly bring conversations back to their own successes. Others engage in name-dropping, mentioning influential people they know in order to elevate their perceived importance. In certain cases, individuals may exaggerate stories or achievements, not necessarily to deceive others, but to strengthen the image they want the world to see. Psychologically, this pattern often stems from a need for external validation. If a person does not feel internally secure about their value, they may attempt to construct that value through the impressions they leave on others. Recognition, admiration, and praise temporarily ease the internal tension created by insecurity, but the relief rarely lasts. This is why the cycle of proving and impressing tends to repeat itself again and again. Interestingly, truly confident individuals rarely feel the need to constantly advertise their strengths. Their confidence is rooted internally, so they are comfortable allowing their actions to speak for themselves. When someone feels secure in their abilities or achievements, they usually do not feel pressure to continuously remind others of them. For someone struggling with hidden insecurity, however, silence can feel dangerous. If their achievements are not visible, they may worry that their value will go unnoticed. As a result, they invest significant energy in maintaining an image that reassures both themselves and others that they are worthy of admiration. But even with all the effort spent trying to impress the world, another fear often remains just beneath the surface. It is the quiet fear of being ignored, overlooked, or rejected. And that fear reveals the next psychological sign of hidden insecurity: a deep sensitivity to attention and acceptance. Another subtle but powerful sign of hidden insecurity is an intense sensitivity to being ignored or rejected. Every human being values acceptance to some degree. Social connection is deeply rooted in human psychology, and feeling excluded can naturally create discomfort. But when a person reacts strongly to even small signs of being overlooked, it may reveal a deeper fear that their presence or value is not truly recognized. For individuals struggling with hidden insecurity, attention can feel like proof of worth. When others acknowledge them, listen to them, or include them in conversations, it reinforces the belief that they matter. But when attention shifts elsewhere, even for completely ordinary reasons, it can quietly trigger feelings of inadequacy. In their mind, the situation may quickly transform into a personal rejection. This sensitivity often shows itself through overthinking social interactions. A delayed message reply, a conversation that moves on without them, or a gathering where someone else becomes the center of attention may lead them to question their importance. They may begin analyzing what they said, what others meant, or whether they did something wrong to lose attention. In relationships, this fear can sometimes create behaviors that appear overly dependent. The person may frequently seek reassurance that they are valued, appreciated, or loved. When reassurance is not immediately available, the absence of attention may be interpreted as emotional distance or rejection. These reactions are rarely intentional manipulations. They are often unconscious attempts to protect themselves from the deeper fear of being unimportant. Psychologists often link this behavior to a strong fear of abandonment or exclusion. When someone has experienced rejection, neglect, or emotional instability earlier in life, they may become hyper-aware of any situation that resembles those experiences. Their mind begins to watch closely for signs that history might repeat itself. Secure individuals usually interpret social situations with more flexibility. They understand that people can be distracted, busy, or focused elsewhere without it reflecting their value as a person. Their sense of belonging does not depend entirely on constant attention or reassurance. But for someone carrying hidden insecurity, attention can feel like emotional oxygen. Without it, their internal doubts begin to grow louder. In response, some individuals attempt to reduce this uncertainty by taking control of their environment or the people around them. This instinct leads directly to the final and often overlooked psychological sign: the need to control others and situations. The final psychological sign of hidden insecurity often appears in the form of control. At first, controlling behavior may look like strong leadership, confidence, or decisiveness. Some individuals naturally take charge of situations, organize plans, and guide group decisions. But when the need for control becomes constant and excessive, it can reveal an underlying attempt to manage deeper feelings of uncertainty. For someone who secretly struggles with insecurity, unpredictability can feel uncomfortable. Situations that are not within their influence may trigger anxiety because they introduce the possibility of failure, embarrassment, or rejection. To reduce this discomfort, they attempt to shape their environment in ways that minimize risk to their self-image. This control can manifest in many subtle ways. In conversations, they may interrupt frequently or dominate discussions so that their voice remains the most influential. In relationships, they might attempt to dictate how others behave, what decisions are made, or how plans unfold. By controlling the direction of interactions, they reduce the chances of feeling powerless or overlooked. Sometimes this behavior appears in the form of micromanagement, whether in friendships, family dynamics, or professional settings. The person may insist on overseeing every detail and decision. While this may appear as dedication or perfectionism, it can also be a strategy to prevent mistakes or outcomes that might expose their insecurities. Psychologically, control creates a temporary illusion of stability. When a person feels that they are directing events and influencing people, it gives them a sense of safety. The world feels more predictable, and their self-image feels less vulnerable to outside judgment. However, this sense of security is often fragile because it depends heavily on external circumstances remaining under their influence. Individuals with genuine confidence tend to be far more comfortable with uncertainty. They trust their ability to adapt, learn, and respond to challenges without needing to control every outcome. Because their self-worth is stable, they do not feel threatened when others contribute ideas, make decisions, or take the lead. For someone carrying hidden insecurity, however, releasing control can feel risky. It exposes them to situations where they may not appear strong, capable, or respected. As a result, they may continue trying to manage people and environments as a way to protect their fragile sense of identity. Recognizing this pattern completes the picture of how insecurity often hides behind everyday behaviors. But understanding these signs is not meant to label or judge people. In reality, insecurity is a universal human experience, and the deeper lesson lies in how we respond to it. This leads us to the final reflection on what true confidence actually looks like. Hidden insecurity is far more common than most people realize. It does not belong to a specific group of people, nor does it only affect those who appear shy or uncertain. In many cases, the individuals who appear the most confident on the outside are quietly fighting the strongest internal battles with self-worth. The behaviors we have explored, seeking validation, constant comparison, criticizing others, resisting criticism, trying to impress people, fearing rejection, and controlling situations, are often protective shields built to guard fragile self-esteem. What makes insecurity so complex is that it rarely announces itself openly. Instead, it hides inside everyday behaviors that can easily be misunderstood. A person who constantly boasts may not be arrogant, but desperately trying to feel valued. Someone who criticizes others may not truly believe they are superior, but may be attempting to silence their own self-doubt. Understanding this psychological dynamic helps us see human behavior with more awareness and less judgment. It is also important to recognize that insecurity is not a permanent condition. Every human being experiences moments of doubt, fear, or comparison. These feelings are part of being human. What separates secure individuals from insecure ones is not the absence of these emotions, but how they respond to them. People with genuine confidence learn to build their self-worth internally rather than depending on constant validation from the outside world. Real confidence does not need to prove itself. It does not rely on dominating conversations, impressing others, or controlling every situation. True confidence is quiet, stable, and grounded. It allows a person to accept feedback without feeling attacked, celebrate the success of others without feeling threatened, and move through life without constantly seeking approval. When we begin to understand the psychology behind insecurity, we also begin to understand ourselves better. Many of these behaviors may appear in small ways within our own lives. Recognizing them is not something to feel ashamed of. In fact, awareness is often the first step toward developing deeper emotional strength and self-confidence. Human behavior is full of hidden patterns, and once you start noticing them, the world begins to make more sense. The way people speak, react, compete, or seek attention often reveals far more than words alone ever could. If you found these insights interesting, take a moment to reflect on the behaviors you notice around you. Which of these signs have you seen in people you interact with every day? And which ones might have quietly appeared in your own life without you realizing it? For more explorations into psychology, human behavior, and the hidden patterns that shape the way we think and act, make sure to subscribe and stay connected. Understanding the human mind is one of the most powerful tools we have for understanding the world and ourselves.